So, calling myself out here, I'm about to do something really hypocritical, which is I just posted to Twitter and said that I wasn't going to do video, that I'm not interested in it, and that it's just not something that I want to do. And then about 15 minutes after I posted that, I was like, oh, actually, there was this one thing that I wanted to talk about. So, it's something I wanted to write a piece about this last year in Pride Month, and I'd love to write one this year. But I also think it's something that needs discussing right now, and particularly whilst we're in the break between a few Grand Prix and just before Baku, which God knows isn't a bastion for this. And that's that there's been a few things that I've posted about to Twitter in the last few weeks, specifically about Miami and the situation in Florida, and also about Hungary, to do with the massive erosion of LGBTQ plus people's rights. It's particularly affecting transgender people, but all people within the LGBTQ plus spectrum are under some level of attack and suspicion, in both Florida and in Hungary, and also in Texas, where the US Grand Prix is held. And every time I've said, this needs to come up, we need to talk about this in the context of the Grand Prix, we need to talk about this to Formula One, Formula One need to answer to this. And people mostly have agreed because, yeah, these are horrific things and none of us want to see them happening, especially those of us who are LGBTQ plus ourselves. And then there's also two other responses, both of which kind of intertwine to me in answering them. One of which is, well, what's it got to do with Formula One? And the other one is, but it's a lot worse in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Bahrain or wherever, point at a map somewhere. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about both of them. So just to set the scene, I'll put some links in the description. There's a lot of people doing really good explainer videos about this in depth if you don't know much about what's going on. But the situation in Florida is so bad that human rights groups have advised people not to go there if you're LGBTQ plus. And a piece of legislation in Hungary just nearly passed. It's already illegal to be transgender in Hungary. It's already illegal to be same-sex married. And the Orban, the Prime Minister, tried to put through a piece of legislation which would have encouraged people to report any same-sex parents who were parenting children. So regardless of if, say, somebody had had a child and then got into a same-sex relationship, this isn't even just banning kind of like IVF and stuff for same-sex couples. It's actively saying that they will break apart any family where the parents are of the same sex. And then in Texas, there's been repeated indictments of Governor Greg Abbott's regime, his attacks on transgender and non-binary people in particular, but the overall LGBTQ plus community. And there's lots to read up on about all three of those things, as well as the broadening situation or the worsening situation for LGBTQ plus rights across the globe. And like, I live in the UK, it's happening here on a very major level. So I think it's important to talk about it globally and also in these very specific contexts. Now, why does it matter to Formula One? Well, because Formula One goes there. And Formula One is an event that people attend. It's an event that people go to as staff. It's an event that people go to as media. It's an event that people go to as sponsors and VIPs who are funding the whole thing. It's an event that people buy exorbitantly priced tickets for, because they love the sport so much and they want to go. And in both situations, in terms of Florida and in terms of Hungary, the deterioration in LGBTQ plus rights has been so sharp that you could easily have bought your ticket and then found that you now are being actively discouraged by human rights groups to attend, which is the kind of thing you should probably take fairly seriously. And to have that for both ticket holders and for members of staff and for anyone who is a participant within the Grand Prix, by that I don't mean like the drivers, I mean everyone who is involved on some level. There's a responsibility when the terms of something change that dramatically, to say, well, if you can't attend because of this situation, because now we're holding an event where actually only some people can attend, then you need to take responsibility for that. Or you need to do what I'll talk about in a minute, more to do with the Middle East, and say, well, actually, our event has to be inclusive, so you need to roll this back in the context of this. Will that make it safe for people to go there and travel there? Probably not. But there is a conversation or a negotiation that F1 and the FIA has with states in the same way that FIFA does, where they at least get very weak reassurances that people would be safe to attend and some sort of lip service about it. Whilst that's not the case, and whilst a situation is actively developing and worsening, we have to talk about it. And we have to talk about the fact that it's something which is affecting the way that people can attend the Grand Prix and who can attend the Grand Prix. And if we don't talk about that, then it's messed up. Especially given we do talk about, and we do completely rightly ask questions about events in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain and China and other countries with terrible human rights records, particularly when it comes to LGBTQ plus people. And the reason that we're given by Stefano Domenicali, that we should be going to those places, and this is something I've said, and an argument that from my own experiences going, I think there is a case for, that going can help things and that it can force change, and that there is things that can be meaningfully improved by rocking up with big international events, like the way that Formula E held the first big open concerts in Saudi Arabia as part of the first E-Prix event. People were probably a lot more invested in that than the racing. And if you look back at the history of the fall of the Soviet Union, then the first concerts were big milestones within the breaking down of a lot of the restrictions there. And yes, it led to major instability, bloodshed, and the current incredibly oppressive Russian regime. So, but there is a case for entertainment and for sport having some role in these kind of things. If it's the case that we're going to Saudi Arabia, we're going to Qatar, we're going to Bahrain, because there's an opportunity for the sport to do good and for things to change for the better, then it can't go to places where things are actively changing for the worse and not face questions about it. Because if the point of going to Jeddah is that we're meant to be making an impression on human rights, admittedly, according to Stefano, by not talking about them because revolutions are done in silence. Don't remember that bit. But if that's the case in those places, then it also has to be the case in places like Miami, in places like Kota, and in places like Hungary, where, okay, the legislation was narrowly judged, but there's already a terrible human rights situation for LGBTQ plus people, And yeah, we have to ask about it in the UK and anywhere else where these issues are coming up. So I just wanted to talk about that a bit. I figured this actually is the kind of thing where video is useful and where it's useful for me as an LGBTQ plus, but well, as a gay person who works in motorsport, who has been in paddocks, who worked at F1, who worked in Formula E, and has been to some places where that's not legal and where there are difficulties for LGBTQ plus people. Um, I feel like it's important to talk about it, and that maybe this is one of the circumstances where it's useful to put a face to it, because I know a lot of people who now can't work at the Miami Grand Prix who were expecting to, or are questioning whether they should work at the Miami Grand Prix, are questioning whether they should go to COTA. I even know people who have tickets for Hungary and are now thinking, well, is it worth the risk? That's not a situation that people should be in, to go to a Grand Prix. And definitely where there are these situations that are changing so rapidly, I think that Formula One and the FIA needs to have some kind of response, either in acknowledging that the terms of the event has shifted and being willing to compensate people, or for acknowledging that they are holding an event in a situation that is bad enough that human rights groups are actively urging people not to attend because of who they are. So hopefully this was kind of helpful and discussed some decent points. And yeah, I'm going to edit it super quickly and then go to the pub because I don't really want to look at